Now that's innovation. I've never had one of those before, ever, at a talk. It's great to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me. I was thinking about why on earth I might have been asked to talk, and the only thing that I could come up with was that I must be one of the few people in the world that has survived not only the dot-com crash, but a real-world crash as well. And perhaps because of that, I have a kind of unique insight into the crazy collision of technology and the health system. So what I'd like to talk to you about are kind of three things, really. And I'm going to start with what I took away most strongly from my nearly 2 years in hospital. Because innovation to me wasn't really about the whizziest scanner that I was put in, or the most incredible bit of keyhole surgery that they did on my pelvis, or the amazing bit of titanium that holds my leg together. It was much smaller than that. It was all about the micro. It was all about the tiny things that particularly nurses did to make sure that my stay was a little bit more bearable. And it was those micro things that now, when I stand back 3 years on from leaving hospital, really stay in my mind. When they're great, they're phenomenal. Some of the things that nurses did for me when I was unable to move and lying completely flat on my back for kind of 3 or 4 months without even standing up, stayed and made my journey a lot more inspirational and achievable. For example, when I was first conscious in the ICU unit, an incredible Filipino nurse called Marley talked to me all the time, constantly talking through the night all the time, because she knew I was frightened and because I couldn't speak because I was on the ventilator. So when I could finally speak, I knew everything about this lady, and she was gobsmacked that I'd remember the very smallest detail about her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren, all of the things that were happening in her family. But she was fantastic because she kept me calm through the time, which was one of the bleakest and one of the most difficult. Then there was Jenna, the nurse in the John Radcliffe neurosurgery unit, who would tie my hair into different styles every morning, particularly if my friends were coming to visit. I'm far too vain for my own good, and having to spend 7 months on my back, not really able to wash properly, certainly not being able to wear my own clothes, little touches that Jenna had done made me feel a little bit more human. Then there was my fabulous carer, Jackie, one of the most discreet and extraordinary nurses that I came across. Small things. The first time I ever sat in a shower, she just stood back, shut the door, left me there for a minute or two, always knocked before she came into the room, always touched me when she came and sat by my bedside. And it was those small, personal things that I think are real innovation. The things that actually nurses know inherently, but in my experience, sometimes were stopped from being able to do as they got further up the chain, or they got more and more grand within their profession. Similarly, the flip side of all of that is when those small things are not done well, it can destroy your day, your week. It can destroy the atmosphere in your room and all the things that you're trying to keep at bay. There was the doctor who would take blood and manage to get more blood on the floor and on his tie and on the nurses than actually out of me. And the nurses around him were completely unable to deal with this totally out of control doctor. There was the very, very, very frequent shouting and noisiness at the nurses' station, often in the night. I'd be lying there thinking, I don't think you understand how much I can hear of your conversations and how much better it would be if you were just a notch quieter. Or there was the terrible distraction while round my bedside. As you may be aware, when you're an orthopedic patient, you have to be turned all the time, moved from one side to the other. And they would often come in, just start doing this without explaining to me exactly what was going on. And it's those small things, both good and bad, that I have taken away after my very long time in hospital, and that I feel most passionately about technology being able to help. Let me explain how. Often, maybe as an individual, you feel as though your voice, the small thing that you've noticed, some of the examples I've given to you, are not really able to make a difference. that maybe if you complain about the hair in the bathroom, or maybe if you complain about being subjected to terrible blood taking, it's not actually going to add up to much change. Well, this is the thing that I think the web is beginning to enable on an enormous scale. And it's one of the most exciting trends that I see across every single thing that I feel lucky enough to be involved in, whether it's Marks and Spencer's or whether it's one of the charities that I've been supporting with my foundation. This idea that the web can allow you to plug in to people like you or services that you're using or people in authority and challenge them and give feedback is something that is really disrupting the way that we work. Let me explain a bit what I mean. I'm sure you've all heard about social media. Probably some of you are twittering away right now. What on earth is she on about? We know what she's talking about. But the thing that I noticed is the biggest difference from when I started lastminute.com to now, and if we were starting it now, is that in those early days of the web, you built a site, you had a big URL, lastminute.com, we just kept saying lastminute.com everywhere, and people would come to the website. Now it's a lot more complicated and challenging. You have to put yourself where everybody is having a conversation or looking for the relevant information, whether they're looking for products or ideas or whatever it might be. And it's that change that's subtle but very fundamental. Now, whether I'm Marks and Spencer's or whether I'm the NHS, I think that you have to think about how do I engage people in a much more open conversation about what I do? How do I encourage feedback? How do I not get frightened about it? This is beginning to happen, I think, across all kinds of public services. There's a website called theyworkforyou.com. It was one of the first sites that really laid government bare. It's been absolutely fundamental in all of the expensive scandals recently. There's guides for learning, for the education system, something called My Guide, which again allows users to talk about the education system, particularly older learners. There's fabulous new sites being developed now. You may be aware of them. Some of them are here today. NHS Unlocked for doctors to talk to each other. Patient Opinion for patients to give feedback to the hospitals and the trusts that they've been involved in. When I was thinking about what I talk about today, I researched a bit about the fabulous Nye Bevan and his incredible brain that came up with this extraordinary endeavour that was the NHS. And in one of his speeches, something very much rang true. He said, "Freedom of discussion and readiness to do so are the only way to safeguard what we have done and open new discoveries." Now, he was talking about something slightly different back in the 1950s, but that to me has enormous resonance here now in 2009, and is exactly what I mean when I talk about trying to think how we open the discussion between patients and doctors, between doctors, not be frightened of criticism, but actually embrace it and use it to make the service even better than perhaps it's been in the past. When I first went on the board of M&S, I said to them, you know what, you should really ask your customers what they think about things, and you should have open forums on the internet where they're allowed to say if they think something's not very good, and if they think a design is wrong, or heaven forbid, a bra might be too big, too expensive, all of the rest of it. And even 2 years ago, all of the board looked at me as though I was completely insane. What do you mean, ask customers whether or not they think they could do a better job of designing our products? What do you mean, ask customers whether they think the chicken curries taste right? In that period of time, not because of me, but because of the trends that have been happening in the macro environment, even M&S, as you'll see from the recent bra scandal you probably were aware of, now absolutely are embracing all of these new kinds of technologies.